Welcome to my second game dev vlog. This was my third year doing the Global Game Jam for a project called Complex.net. I worked on this again with my brother, but this year was a little bit different. He caught the flu right before the Global Game Jam, so we had said that we wouldn't spend as much time on it this year, but we still did. Complex.net is a 2D adventure game with point-and-click elements. There are many mini-games included, ranging from quick-time events to puzzles, and even some learning Japanese. Now that you have an idea of what the game is, let's go through the process. When we heard the theme was transmission, we weren't really sure what to do with it. We started by looking at the Wikipedia page for transmission, and jotted down ideas for what we could extract from it. We made a list of themes and concepts from the nays that might relate to it. This included things like going into mines, teleportation, subway system, voices over tape recorders, and ultimately, Complex.net, which is where we ended up. Complex.net is a chatting app that the nays use both on their phones and in virtual reality headsets. It's based on the old IRC chats that my brother and I used to talk to people on when we were kids. It's just a more futuristic interpretation of how it felt at the time. So we made a list of all the characters most involved in Complex.net in our main story. We played around with what the gameplay would be, and first thought it might be a point-and-click game. We ended up keeping that in mind for some of the parts, but it wasn't the whole focus. We had this idea at first of having a character creator, but then we decided that might be out of scope. So we went with just choosing a few of the characters that you would switch between playing as for different parts of the game. We decided we would do one interaction per character to make sure we were properly scoping. Since we had a lot of characters planned in the game, we mostly reused some assets like old drawings for portraits and char sets that we made in a character creator previously. This was just to speed up the development a bit. But for any new characters, I drew new faces. I started on drawing characters while my brother set up our RPG Maker project and started on some of the programming. He started with the box pushing minigame for Scott's story and got it working with some of the default RTP sprites. Meanwhile, I made the dialogue box and header interface elements, theming it all to be like it's in a virtual environment. My brother worked on the QuickTime events for Xandra's story. Basically, the prompt immediately moves to the next input once you press a button. It keeps a tally of the correct pushes, and there's a timer shown on screen using a scalable image. He'd even created a math formula for all this, so it was pretty advanced. Then I created the title screen for our game, and also worked on starting our public game jam page. The next day, we got a much earlier start compared to last year, since my family was mostly sick, so we got right to it. My brother made the loading screen that's shown between each of the levels to have a transition. Then we worked on Gare's minigame, where he learns Japanese. My brother had been studying Japanese, so he laid out all of his flashcards, and we chose which ones we wanted to make words out of for this game. We gave hints for those not familiar with Japanese underneath the hiragana characters. The player clicks the character button and it appears at the top of the slot, then checks if the answer is correct. I worked on the UI and art for this one, while my brother set up all the variables and functionality of it. Then I started to work on the story for the game. I started with the opening sequence, and then filled in some dialogue between each of the mini-games to further connect them together. This included all of the branching paths and different outcomes, depending on how well the player did on the minigame. After that, I made a character selection screen. We decided that we wanted to have the player choose which order to do them in, so I put that together using some art I had already drawn of our characters. I eventually animated it using a mouse hover over plugin in RPG Maker. For this, I used a script call for the conditional branch to check for 4 different variable values. Basically, the code checks whether the player got a ranking with the characters in all of the minigames, and if they did, the ending sequence plays. I hadn't really used AND operators before, so this was something that I learned on this project. So once you complete all the minigames, you get a score at the end for how well you did. My brother made the score screen art, and I programmed the mechanics on how it worked. This was my first time checking for a variable range in RPG Maker. I started learning a bit about JavaScript using the RPG Maker script calls sheet, so that was helpful to implement some of that into the conditional branches here. While I was working on these mechanics in the game, my brother finished some of the UI that was left to make. He made the QuickTime event minigame interface, where the timer scales down as more time passes. Then he also made the art for the box pushing game and finished up those mechanics. My brother went to bed around 9 a.m., and that's when I finished everything up. I made a scrolling credits scene for this game so it had more of a conclusion. This started the yearly trend of including a themed image for this. In the last hours, I fixed most of the game-breaking bugs, but unfortunately, since he worked on most of the code for the minigames, there were a few things I wasn't able to perfect and fully fix how we wanted it. So I finished it up as much as I could and then submitted it by 2 p.m. Overall, we had a finished project and made some cool minigames for it, but it did fall into the trap of what a few of our future games ended up being, which was mostly a series of minigames. Now we try to avoid this because we've done it a lot, but I guess it was only the second time we did it back then. For Complex.net, my brother mostly focused on the programming, while I focused on the UI, so we didn't do a ton of the other side. I wished I had done more programming and understood what was happening behind the code at the time, but he did a good job with it, so it turned out well. Looking back on this one, it makes sense that it was a little less ambitious because we had planned for this to be an easier year. So I'm happy with how it turned out in that regard. It's good to see how far we've come. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to see my other Global Game Jam devlogs, check out the description below. Until next time.